All right. Well, good morning, everyone. Thanks for being here again. And this is our last meeting of discussing this book, Ralph Martin's book, The Fulfillment of All Desire. And so, even if you haven't had the book this whole time, I think just kind of listening to the sessions or kind of the looking at the discussions, going back and watching the videos, I think we kind of get a really good introduction to the spiritual life. And so today we're basically doing the end of the book. So chapter 16, he talks about the fruits of union. So we're kind of in this, he's in the describing the third stage of the spiritual life, the unitive way. And so he talks about the fruits of union. And then his last chapter, chapter 17, he titles There's Always More. So basically this idea that we're always growing in the spiritual life, even for those who are at the high level, that unitive way, there's still always more. And then he has kind of a little conclusion, his final encouragement. And so we could talk about that a little bit as well. But those are that's the main thing that we're discussing today. Again, this is like describing the high levels of the spiritual life, the unitive way, that kind of third stage. And so he begins by, in this part, saying that the fruits, kind of the visible things that this person experiences in his or her spiritual life, they've been growing the whole way. So these fruits don't just come out of nowhere, but at this high level, in this what's called the spiritual marriage, the fruits deepen, blossom, and stabilize in a really profound way. And so he then kind of describes basically the what this person's spiritual life looks like. Last week we talked about the spiritual betrothal and the spiritual marriage, kind of these two inner stages of this unitive way. But then what is the person actually experiencing? And so the first thing is fruitfulness in work. So basically the idea that these people who are very high in the spiritual life, they become very productive in the sense that the things that they set their mind to, they achieve, and they can really achieve great things. And so and again, he brings in all these beautiful quotes from these great saints and authors. And for this handout, like the last couple I've done, I'm basically just kind of picking the quotes that he has already chosen and kind of trying to hone in a little bit on what he's saying. But yeah, the quotations are excellent, and so it's a good thing to go back, maybe take the handout and kind of spend some time with the quotes, reflecting on what these saints have given us in their writings. But yeah, basically, and something that uh, he's getting at in this whole chapter is that the person who is in this unitive way isn't static. They're not just kind of like in this peaceful relationship with God. I mean, they certainly are, but they're not just, that doesn't take them away from the world or the activities that they're doing, and especially if the activities are apostolic in the sense that they're, part of a trying to bring people to God. We talk about the apostolate, basically a synonym for ministry. Each of us has that apostolate, that kind of the ministry of bringing other people to God. So evangelization, preaching, maybe not in a homily, but in kind of the way we live our lives or the things that we share with other people. And so for people in the unitive way, they're still doing that. And in fact, they're doing it in an even more profound way. And so that's something that'll come up in a few ways here. But I think we see this fruitfulness in work. I mean, the saints achieve really great things. Certainly, it's not necessary. You could be like Saint Therese and live your whole life in a convent and not be known in the outside world. But then, contrasted with Saint Teresa of Calcutta, who did build this great organization, the Missionaries of Charity, and did great work on like a global scale. There is a fruitfulness in work that comes from God. And so I think we really see that in the saints. The next thing he lists is an immense fortitude. So basically, the soul is able to withstand, great pressure. So fortitude is kind of another word for courage, steadfastness. And so the fortitude comes from love. And so I like this quote. I'm going to read this one. The soul easily extracts the sweetness of love from all the things that happen to her. That is, she loves God in them. Thus, everything leads her to love. And being informed and fortified as she is with love, she neither feels nor tastes nor knows the things that happen to her, whether delightful or bitter, since, as we said, the soul knows nothing else but love. God makes use of nothing other than love. So basically, the soul is able to withstand a bunch of things in life, and whatever happens to her, whether delightful or bitter, it's all kind of the same because the soul loves God so much. The soul is able to deal with anything that comes her way in life, and so she's able to love God in all of the situations of her life, whether it be really difficult, someone's treating her poorly, or it be something really, really good, everything um, comes back to love. So, yes, Dave.
A question on that, because if the heart just knows love and there's no bitterness, that means if it does this, I guess it's a question. Does that mean that bad things that happen to us may possibly have a love component to them that maybe educates us spiritually or something like that, so that everything that happens to us comes from God's love? Is that too deep?
Uh, you're kind of asking, yeah, do even the bad things that happen to us have an aspect of love? I mean, I
I mean, is that what this says?
yeah, and so yeah, he's talking about, yeah, the person in like this high level, yeah, the person at that high level is able to see the aspect of God's love in everything. Yeah, so I think there is. I mean, yeah, we know God permits everything that happens to us. God at least permits it, even if He doesn't will it outright. Because yeah, people do bad things that aren't willed by God, but yeah, He permits them to happen. And yeah, if
But they learn from them.
right, yeah, yeah, if someone does something bad to us, yeah, there's an aspect of that where we can learn from it, and yeah, it's certainly easier to see that with some things rather than others. But yeah, the truly saintly person is able to see that in everything that happens to them, even if they face great setbacks, either from natural disasters or troubles or from evil or difficult people. They're able to stay steadfast, even in that. So yeah, yeah, I think that's a good point. Yeah, it's a lot harder to see that, you know, to see how God can bring good even out of evil or out of difficult things. But yeah, the saint, I think, is able to see that. Continual prayer. This was a really short section. Basically, he just says that the souls are always in prayer. So it's pretty self-explanatory. When you're in this like deep union with God, your whole life is basically lived in prayer. You're always kind of pouring out praises to God and uh, adoration and thanksgiving for all the various things. So that's pretty straightforward. But then sensitivity to others. So the soul is totally wrapped up in God, but then also is wrapped up in other people. So it's not an exclusive, either or, but the soul, he says, becomes all things to all and is filled with a love that embraces everyone. And so the person who is in this unitive way, who's very close with God, will still stop, maybe their formal prayer, stop saying the rosary, for instance, to go help someone who they know is in need. And so he kind of talks about that, laying aside the book that we're reading so that we can do manual work, to help someone or to achieve some end. Um, how often, so this is St. Bernard, how often for the sake of administering worldly affairs, we very rightly even omit the solemn celebration of masses. So maybe, not he's talking about on a monastery, maybe not doing the big, sung high mass, but having a simple mass and then having more time, to serve the poor or do things like that. And so love in action devises its own order. So there is a certain order to things that is coming from the sensitivity to other people. And then similarly, he talks about contemplation and action. So this kind of goes with what he was saying earlier. Basically, the soul in this unitive way is very wrapped up in God, and so that's like the contemplation, the contemplative life, just being alone with God. But then the that contemplation also leads the soul to a greater action. So action kind of leads to contemplation. We have to do good and grow in virtue in order to reach the contemplation. But then it's kind of circular because then the contemplation leads to a more fervent action. And so he says that a lot of times the soul doesn't really know what it's supposed to be doing. Should I be praying, or should I be helping my neighbor? What exactly should I be doing in this situation? So he talks about how the saints say that we should just continue to pray and ask for God's insight, whether to be more active in a certain moment, to go out on a limb and help our neighbor, or to be more contemplative. Am I doing too much? Am I kind of doing too much action and I'm not spending enough time with God in prayer? The person in the unitive way is trying to strike this balance, and yeah, they're very close with God. So even in their action, they're going to be prayerful, and in their contemplation they're going to be you know kind of led out of that to a greater action. Similarly, Mother Teresa comes up a lot here, but she would always have her sisters do an hour of adoration at the start of the day before then going out and doing their active lives, living that active life. And so the idea that the contemplation leads to a greater action, but the contemplation is the end. It's not. That's kind of the high point of our relationship with God, but then that leads us to then be even more active and apostolic, um, as well. So that's kind of describing contemplation and action. I think that's an important point, in our spiritual life in general. He then talks about the soul has this stable instinct for good. So basically, that even our first the formal term is first movements. So the first movements of the soul, which are our initial inclinations towards people or things or situations, even those are aligned with God's will. So it's kind of like how something happens to us and we have like a split second reaction that we don't. It's a lot of times it's we stub our toe and some four-letter word comes out. Uh, but in this case, so that's kind of like a first movement. It's not really something we control as much as when we're thinking about things and reflecting. So even those first movements for this person in the unitive way is kind of informed by the instinct of God. So our instincts become those of God, and so we're able to follow God's will even in like those first movements. So kind of a fine point, but I think we understand that um, we don't have to like come to our senses at this point. We're kind of always following God in the for those in the unitive way. I'm not When I say we, I'm not saying I'm at this stage, because yeah, that's not the case. But yeah. Um, and then he talks about apostolic fruitfulness. So here it seemed like he's kind of repeating the point he makes in action and contemplation, but I put it here as well because for these handouts I'm kind of just reproducing the sections Ralph Martin has, because in general I find them helpful. But here it seems kind of redundant, or yeah, I'm not sure how apostolic fruitfulness is different from the action contemplation distinction. But he reaffirms that when the soul gives primacy to grace and prayer and the journey towards union with God, that's going to allow it to bear much more fruit. So so even if it seems like we're losing something when we devote time to God rather than helping our neighbor, we're actually gaining something, because that helps us to be even more active. We're giving God his due, and then that helps us to love our neighbor more as well. So we can't like just live this active life of loving our neighbor. There needs to be that contemplation as well, but then that leads to a greater apostolic fruitfulness. And then the soul's love is purified. So in the earlier talks, we talked about how there's like this hierarchy of loves. So in the first early stages, the soul loves God out of like fear of punishment, so kind of in that purgative way. And then the soul loves God partially out of a desire for reward, so that mercenary love in the second level. And then now he's describing the love of the third level, which is purified and joy filled. So yeah, our love of God is no longer rooted in that fear of punishment or the hope of reward, but now is a pure and unselfish love of God for God's own sake. And so there are many ways of expressing this love. This isn't particular to one vocation. It's not like just for the religious life or just for the priesthood, but also is expressed in married life as well. And so that's kind of the love that uh, pertains to this stage of the spiritual life. And then the way that the soul approaches creation kind of changes too. The creatures in the created world, there's a detachment from the created world, so the soul kind of realizes that these things are passing, but then that's what allows the person to actually enjoy the world, enjoy creation. And so he has this long example of Saint Therese on seeing the beauty of the Alps when she was traveling, I think back to either traveling down to Rome or traveling back to France from Rome. So she writes beautifully about the Alps, and then I just included the end here. She describes them as being very beautiful, very powerful and moving. And then here she says, what poetry flooded my soul at the sight of all these things I was seeing for the first and last time in my life. It was without regret I saw them disappear, for my heart longed for other marvels. It had contemplated earthly beauties long enough. Those of heaven were the object of its desires, and to win them for souls, I was willing to become a prisoner. So I think this is when she's going back to France and she plans to enter the convent. And so she kind of realizes that she's not going to see the outside world, the Alps, the beautiful mountains again. But for her, it's actually like a good thing. So she appreciates the beauty, but then realizes that there's something much more beautiful, the soul's relationship with God. Contemplating earthly beauties is wonderful, very powerful, but contemplating the beauties of heaven is like even greater. So that's kind of what appeals to the person at this in this unitive way. They can appreciate in a more profound way than anyone else can the beauties of the world, but then they see the beauty of God, as being even greater than that. So I think that's an important point. And then the soul is in this basically habitual embrace with God, and so the, basically that leads to this peace and kind of this spiritual stability that the soul is kind of in. It's like it's always living the life of God, and so beforehand the soul wouldn't be able to really withstand this. It would be kind of too much to bear. But St. John of the Cross says that now the soul is very strong, and so the soul can be in the presence of God, all the time. And so, um, the soul finds in the state a much greater abundance and fullness of God, a more secure and stable peace, and an incomparably more perfect delight than in the spiritual betrothal. So that earlier stage in the spiritual marriage, it's this habitual embrace. And then that leads to the soul always kind of experiencing the presence of God, so continual presence. And so up till this point, the soul kind of feels God's absence at times. So God seems to come and go. So we kind of talked about that in some of the earlier chapters. But here, for the soul in the unitive way, God is always appears to be present. God is always present to all of us, all the time, regardless. But it's kind of the feeling of His presence. Uh, so this block quote of God speaking to Saint Catherine in her dialogues is very good. I won't read the whole thing, but kind of the beginning. To such as these, it is granted never to feel my absence. So those souls in the unitive way. I told you how I go away from others, in feeling only, not in grace, and then return. I do not act thus with these most perfect ones, who have attained great perfection and are completely dead to every selfish impulse. No, I am always at rest in their souls, both by grace and by feeling. And so yeah, God is present to us always by grace, sometimes by feeling. Yet he's present to us by grace if we're in a state of grace, I should say. Um, and so, but for this soul who is in that unitive way, they kind of always have that feeling. Um, I also like the end of this paragraph. God continues to St. Catherine, when they reach perfection, I relieve them of this lover's game of going and coming back. I call it a lover's game because I go away for love and I come back for love. No, not really I, for I am your unchanging and unchangeable God. What goes and comes back is the feeling my charity creates in the soul. So God's kind of getting at this point that, yeah, it's not really he who's going back and forth, it's this feeling. And he does it out of love. Even when we're experiencing that deprivation of God, he's doing that out of love. And then he comes back to increase our love even more. But for the soul in this unitive way, they don't experience that. Um, yeah. Any questions or anything at this point? Yes.
You hit on that when you said deprivation of love. That goes back to what we were talking about before. I mean, even in the negative, it's all love.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Even in the negative, it's all love. And so, yeah, when we experience that desolation or deprivation of God's presence, it's still out of love. He does that to increase our love. Yeah. So we love him not for the feeling, but we love him for who he is. Yeah.
I have a question about continuous presence. Many of the saints talk about dryness in the spiritual life. So is it saying that if you reach a certain stage, you don't have this dryness, that you always have continuous presence? Or do you experience the dryness even as you strive to be a more perfect human?
Yeah. So yeah, good question. Does the soul experience dryness and aridity in prayer at this stage, or does this continual presence mean that they don't experience that? I'm kind of under the impression that they don't really have that anymore once they reach this high level. So yeah, definitely, when they're in the dark night of the soul, that dryness is very powerful, and some of them are in that, they're kind of going through that for a great deal. And so like Saint Therese, as we'll see, up to the end of her life was in that. And yeah, again, it's hard to like kind of track exactly where a person is. The dark night of the soul leads into this unitive way, but then the person is already kind of in the unitive way as well. So it's hard to track exactly. But yeah, my understanding is once a soul reaches that spiritual marriage, there isn't any more aridity or dryness in prayer. Um, yeah, I mean, yeah, if you have the continual awareness of God's presence, I think, yeah, I think you're kind of past the dryness of that by that point. Um, yeah. And then that union and presence of God produces a constant and lasting jubilation. So kind of this like normal joy, but on a much more higher level. Spiritual joy, but taken to the max. An interior jubilation, which then leads to external things, which Ralph Martin points out. That's why many have found the saints to do kind of crazy things, like Saint Francis of Assisi, our patron here. Kind of him doing yeah, seemingly wild things. Stripping down in the public square to pronounce his love of God and desire to leave his family's business and things like that. So yeah, it's kind of that interior jubilation that then can lead to exterior things. So it's not that they're really, you know, have mental illness or craziness. I mean, I think some of the saints struggle with that, as many people do. But yeah, talking about here, it's a jubilation that it seems out of the ordinary, but it's part of this kind of high level of the spiritual life. The euphoria, yeah, I think in a sense, yeah, on a spiritual level. I mean that leads to the next point of inebriation in the Holy Spirit. So he points to this biblical phenomenon pointing to the Acts of the Apostles, where uh, Peter and the apostles are filled with the Holy Spirit, and people think that they're drunk. And Peter says, it's too early to get drunk. We're not drinking, but we're filled with the Holy Spirit. And so it's like this spiritual truth that, um, for the person at this high level of the spiritual life, they are inebriated with the Spirit, with God. Yeah, it is kind of like a euphoria or kind of a stupor, but not like the worldly version that we see here, but it's a spiritual inebriation. Um, so Saint Bernard talks a lot about this. I just put one of the quotes here. Um, but Saint Bernard relates it to this line about the wine cellar from the Song of Songs. So the king led me into the wine cellar. He set love in order in me. So basically, Saint Bernard, the king leading the betrothed into the wine cellar. That's like God, leading us deeper into our spiritual life. It's this kind of inebriation with the Holy Spirit. And so then Saint Bernard references the Pentecost episode. Uh, Peter said, "These men are not drunk as you suppose. Take note that he denies not that they are drunk, but drunk in the manner supposed by the people. For they were drunk, but with the Holy Spirit, not with wine, intoxicated by the abundance of that house, and drunk from a torrent of a pleasure so great." And so then Saint Bernard goes on to say that it's a good kind of drunk. It's kind of seems wild to use this analogy, but Bernard says it's a good kind of intoxication. Nothing like when people go overboard and kind of lose their senses in that sense. But it's a good intoxication where the soul is led to this great joy and this pleasure, in its relationship with God.
It's more spiritual inebriation than a physical, where you dope your body up or something.
Right. Yeah, it's a totally
Spiritual.
spiritual inebriation. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah, and it's not something that we can do, you can't get, spiritually drunk, so to speak. But yeah, it's God, bestowing his spirit in such a powerful way for the people who are at this unitive stage that yeah, they experience this inebriation of the Holy Spirit. And then the last point in this chapter is that one of the fruits is the enhancement of natural knowledge. So similarly to the things we've been describing, the soul, the soul kind of like advances in knowledge. So God gives it supernatural knowledge, and then this Ralph Martin makes the point that the soul might find itself even better at kind of the pursuits that it already had. So he talks about how Saint Therese like as she grew spiritually, she became better at history or better at math or other things, which seems like pretty bizarre, but it makes sense. I guess God increases that knowledge in our souls of like the spiritual knowledge, and then that can lead to a better natural knowledge as well. But at the same time, then for the person at this level, they realize that the natural knowledge isn't enough. That the knowledge that they have of God is even better. So St. John of the Cross says the soul is being informed with supernatural knowledge, in the presence of which all natural and political knowledge of the world is ignorance rather than knowledge. The natural sciences themselves and the very works of God, when set beside what it is to know God, are like ignorance. For where God is unknown, nothing is known. So this like totally flies in the face of our modern scientific world, where um, the modern world thinks that we just need to continue to know the natural world and to study things. God doesn't really factor into it. We've kind of separated knowledge of God and knowledge of the created world, but they really need to go together for there to be true knowledge. Otherwise, it's just vanity, and you know um, yeah, we're going down a bad road, as we are in many ways in our society. But yeah, talking about the individual soul, the spiritual knowledge and the natural knowledge go together, and they're both enhanced at this unitive stage. Um, so yeah, so that's that first of these two chapters at the end. Any questions or points of consideration that we want to discuss from here? Yes, Jim.
It seems to me that this is like the qualities of a super saint. The 7 habits of the effective saints or Eagle Scout on the Boy Scout level. What about the rest of us?
Sure.
I mean,
Yeah.
what about those people who will never achieve everything on this list or even partial? We have us a chance to become saints?
Yeah, it's a good question. You're saying that this seems like too high of a level.
Yeah, yeah.
Like, yeah, like you're the super saint or the Eagle Scout of saints. What about everyone else? Yeah, I would say, yeah, everyone else read through the earlier parts of the book and yeah, I mean,
Well, of course,
You want to end up here, but you know, like using the Eagle Scout type of analogy, not everybody has all those skills. They'll never be an Eagle Scout or be a first class scout.
but in which life are you speaking?
I don't know. I'm talking about this life. I'm
Yeah.
talking about
Okay,
Yeah.
it's not all gonna happen in this life.
yeah, I think for some it does happen in this life, and yeah, those are the people who make it to this level, and yeah, even for them, it's not, as we'll see, they're not they're not totally in heaven yet. You know, they're still human beings, but yeah, I think it is attainable. I mean, yeah, you don't need, the thing is, you don't need special skills like an Eagle Scout. You know, you don't need like certain badges. It's like the only skill you need is following God. You know, putting yourself in the presence of God, and you know,
Right.
it doesn't. It's not a technical skill. Yeah.
May I take issue with that?
Okay.
All
Sure.
right. I think they are skills. I think the virtues are skills. And I think the way you develop your virtues is by practicing them. Okay?
Sure.
And the way you remove yourself from the vices is through practicing actions that remove your physical self from it. And I think in those moments, you come in touch with your spiritual compass. And that's, I think you do have a certain responsibility that God wants us to be responsible for our spiritual growth.
Sure. Yeah. Touche. That's a good point. Yeah. Yeah. The virtues are the skills or the merit badges, so to speak, that we do need to attain that, and yeah, we grow in them by exercising them, by using them. Yeah, I still think it is attainable. I mean, you know, all of us can grow in virtue,
How hard
and
you work at it.
yeah, yeah,
Or would you say it's a progression? You start here and you build to to your knowledge and your spiritualness, and maybe that's why some of us have to stay here longer. I'm not sure about that.
right.
You know, some of those things got young, so they already got there. You know, but maybe we have to stay longer to get there. I don't know. That's kind of
Yeah, yeah. I mean, no, I mean, yeah, I think you're right. It is definitely a progression. Yeah, it's a progression, and he makes that exact point on Saint Therese and the next chapter that God worked quickly in her life, you know, possibly because, you know, he knew that she would die young. And so, yeah, for her, she made a great deal of progress early on. And then, you know, contrast with Mother Teresa, who, you know, at the beginning experienced visions and locutions from God, but then was stuck in the darkness for so long. You know, I don't think she ever got out of the dark night. So,
But she made many sacrifices along the way
sure,
to practice what God wanted her to do.
certainly, yeah, yeah,
I mean,
yeah. She made
we
sacrifices.
might watch a TV program instead of Mother Teresa would say, "What? No, we're going to do, you know."
Right. Yeah. No, for
So,
sure.
thinking about the idea that you do have to practice or there's tools is that we talk about that. I think that's what our church gets us. I mean, that's what, you know, in the Catholic Church, we have lots of tools, going to mass,
doing adoration, saying the rosary. I mean, we have things that in a lot of ways help us too, as you were saying about practicing and the virtues, but also practicing because it seems like that people that I know that have stopped going to church, when I say going to church, going to mass or being something like that, they seem to struggle in ways, like with just what's happening in our world right now. There's a lot more struggles, and just myself, that's what I think is. And I always say, go back to church or go to mass. Well, I don't get anything out of it. Well, but you could. You don't know until you go. You
Right.
might. That's when. So I think there is some ability that we have to keep practicing. It seems like that's what a lot of the saints did, is they kept it up.
Yeah.
And I think you were saying earlier on some of the things about action that are in on the contemplation and action. That if we don't do some of those things, I just you hear lots of people say that when they start going to adoration, that makes a big difference, and I would feel that way for myself over the years of now attending adoration. And there's some of the things having to do with the kids and confirmation in some of the parishes that require their kids to go to adoration at least once or twice, once a month or something like that. They say they have had a big significant change in their youth with that. So those sorts of things, like you're saying, is what we have to do. I don't think we could just sit in our houses
Right. To your point
and
with
grow
the
to this point.
to your point with the church, I heard a preacher say once, going to church is like playing the lottery. Sometimes you get nothing, but then all of a sudden
You get something.
you might get something.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. I think you're right. Yeah, Joanne. That we have so many tools. Yeah, we have so many means to help us arrive at this level. Yeah, mass, adoration, practicing the faith. So without those things, yeah, we're definitely not going to advance, very far. So, and yeah, certainly the saints are in these spiritual works. They're kind of presuming that the people that they're speaking to are going to mass, going to confession, uh, taking part in the life of the church. That they have a community as well to support them. Even the hermits, have some kind of community amongst themselves a lot of times. Yeah, you're typically not. Yeah, I don't think you could just be on your own in your room the whole time. Yeah, like Saint Catherine of Siena did that for a time where she was just living in her parents' house, but then yeah, eventually she became, she grew past that and was very active and apostolic, and so yeah, I think we can make it. We have the tools. So yeah,
You have potential.
yeah,
Well, one of the tools is that we're here today.
yeah,
I mean,
yeah. One of the tools is that we're here
talking
today. Yeah,
about it today. I mean, there was a series that I went to was like this, and some people didn't come because they slept in, and someone was out the night before, someone else had company, and I remember the priest saying, well, when we gather in his word, he's here with us, okay? I mean, we all accept that, right? Okay? Well, if somebody told you Jesus was going to be at the meeting today,
yeah.
would you
You'd
get
show
out
up.
of bed?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I
We
mean,
did.
really,
Yeah,
think about it. If you had company, wouldn't you bring them to see Jesus?
yeah, yeah. That point applies to the mass really well too, because yeah, we know Jesus shows up, and yeah, we have the opportunity to
To be with
see
him.
him and to be with him, and yeah, receive him. Yeah, yeah, yes.
I was wondering on his question about the dryness, would that be part of the continual presence when he's coming and going?
Is the dryness part of continue going.
Because he says they lose that feeling, that they're not losing the grace. They may not feel him in that. I was just when he was saying like the dryness that they're going through. Some of these really good saints that, like Mother Teresa, going through that dryness, she didn't lose the grace, but maybe that feeling.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And for the soul in like this like really high level, the unitive way, you know, at least going from what God says to Saint Catherine, he's not doing that anymore. You know, they're always experiencing that presence. But yeah, I think until you get there, I think there is the coming and going. So yeah, I and yeah, it's hard to track where everyone is in their spiritual life, and yeah, that's not something we should do necessarily. Try to see like where someone is or was,
Yeah.
but but yeah, God's telling Saint Catherine like he's not playing that lover's game anymore. You know, he's always with the person in feeling and in grace. Whereas yeah, sometimes until you get to that point, sometimes it is just
I wasn't
in
sure if
grace.
that was the same as the Dark Night of the Soul.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think the Dark Night of the Soul involves the dryness and aridity, but it's a deeper thing. You know, not just dryness, but more, yeah, yeah, more abandonment, more, yeah, temptations to lose faith and stuff like that. Yeah,
I think God is always present. It's just our ability to perceive Him.
right.
You know, when he talks about the lover's game, when he says, I am your unchanging and unchangeable God. So he doesn't leave us. Our ability to perceive him changes.
Yeah, I think that's right. Yeah, he's always with us, but we don't always feel his presence. Yeah, because we're not at that level yet. Basically, yeah, we're not strong enough. You know, the soul in the unitive way is strong enough to always experience that presence of God, and yeah, until we get there, we don't have that. So um, okay, well then, yeah, the final chapter, there's always more. So he basically just affirms that even for the soul in this unitive way, it's not a static union with God. The soul continues to grow closer to God and conform more to Christ. And so God says that to Saint Catherine that yeah, you can't advance to another stage. You're kind of in that final stage, but you can continue to grow. You know, for the soul is never so perfect in this life that she cannot become yet more perfect in love. So basically, yeah, there's always room to grow. You know, Jim, even if you make it to that final level, you'll still be able to go beyond that. But yeah,
Well, don't you reach it? Everybody reaches their final level when they're in heaven, isn't it? I mean, when you see God, I mean, all this other stuff is preliminary. I mean, everybody, no matter if I'm an Eagle Scout or a first class scout, got halfway there. When I see God, all that goes away because I have perfect union with God and I have perfect love.
yeah,
Isn't that right? Isn't this what we're striving for here?
yeah. This is what we're striving for here, and yeah, I don't think in heaven we'll all be the same. I mean, I think our where we're, you know, the amount to which we're satisfied by God will depend on how we lived our lives and how much we were in union with God here. Which yeah, it's not something he goes into much here, but you know, it's you know, every soul in heaven is totally fulfilled by God, but you know, you know, the great saints have a great capacity for God, and so they're more fulfilled than, you know, than
I mean,
yeah,
just using the.
yeah, they have a greater soul than.
I never thought of heaven as being a hierarchy. Yeah.
Oh, really?
A hierarchy of people. I thought everybody,
Yeah, I mean, yeah,
everybody who sees God has the same level of fulfillment. I don't know. I'm sorry.
I think that's
I
kind
never
of
thought about
I think that's kind of an egalitarian, you know, democratic way to look at it. But yeah, the the
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you're exactly right.
Yeah.
It's a democratic way to look at it, but
no the, no that yeah
I've
the
never
tra-
thought of it any differently.
yeah no the traditional idea is that your rank in heaven depends on your saintliness on life and your saintliness in this life. So yeah, everyone's fulfilled by God, but we could picture Mother Teresa as a giant pitcher, and the person who has a deathbed conversion and they convert, they make it to heaven, but they're like a shot glass, compared with Mother Teresa. So yeah,
It's Doc Holliday, Mother Teresa. There you go.
Yeah.
We're not all even here on earth either.
yeah, right,
I mean, we're not all even here.
right, yeah, and
I mean, as you say, there's certain political groups that might think we're all even and want to make us all even.
yeah,
But in truth, we're not all even. Some of us are healthier, some of us are richer, some of us are better looking. I mean,
right, and we don't know why God gives more graces to some. Why did He give so much grace and honor to the Blessed Virgin Mary? I mean, that kind of makes sense because it's the mother of His Son. But you know,
So, but in, I don't know, the end, do, are the souls growing while they're in heaven? So if they're that shot glass, they could become the pitcher
uh,
full. I mean, is during, he's sort of thinking, I'm just thinking about the more recent book that we've been thinking about purgatory, and then saying, well, those people are all gonna go to heaven. They're guaranteed to go to heaven. It's just a matter of when, I guess. That's how I look at it, I guess, from our prayers. But then once you're in heaven, do you keep growing? Does God help you to grow so that you're
I don't know.
totally fulfilled? I guess none of us really know.
Yeah, can souls grow? Can souls grow in heaven?
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
You don't really need anything once you're there.
there's also a concept that we have to accept that we just don't know.
Yeah, we
Yeah.
don't know.
I mean, we put our trust in God. But do we know what's going on in heaven? I don't think any of us know.
And yeah, he's talking about growth in this life. He doesn't talk about growing once we already have that beatific vision. And yeah, I've never heard of that particularly, of souls being able to grow once they're in heaven. Yeah, I think once you're there, you're kind of there. It's definitely not a static union. I mean, it is dynamic, but
Well, there's
yeah.
a story about how you live on earth is how you get rewarded. It said the priest went up to the golden gates and St. Peter said, here, he took him to a nice little house and little spot. And this attorney came up, right? He got this big mansion. And the priest said to Peter, he says, I lived my whole life as a priest and this attorney. He says, but I got to tell you, we don't get many of them up here.
That's a good lawyer joke. I like that. Yeah, that's good.
We don't get many of them.
Wow. Did you have?
It always helps to laugh.
I was thinking with the difference when they were describing how different levels there are up there, wouldn't that be the same as what we call on different saints for patron for healing? I mean, we call on, there's like Saint Lucy for your eye, your patron saint of your vision. And so they're now, you know what I mean? I know you could probably ask all the saints to intercede for you in prayer, but just saying there are specialized, they were specially known for different things is how we're taught.
Yeah.
So that's still different up there.
Yeah. That's interesting. Yeah, we kind of we have an implicit hierarchy when we are praying to particular patrons for various things. Yeah. I think this saint can help me more in this area than
Right.
another saint. Yeah, I think that's a good good observable phenomenon. Yeah. We've kind of been hitting on what his theme in chapter 17. There's always more. So basically that he then goes into the example of Saint Teresa's life and Mother Teresa's life. So these are both kind of long sections that I just briefly summarized here. But Saint Therese basically, she made a lot of progress, and then the last year and a half of her life was spent in this spiritual darkness. But then at the end, she kind of, you know, based on the way her sisters, the sisters in her community, describe her last moments, she did experience that love of God and presence of God, and it seems she had a very beautiful kind of end. And so this quote from the Story of the Soul talks about her delight, in God, even in the darkness, how she's able to find a greater joy in suffering for love of God. So that's pretty profound. And then he talks about the darkness of Mother Teresa's life and how maybe that was given to her to help her deal with the fame and the things that she had to experience. Maybe the dark night part of her dark night was experiencing the lack of God because she was so praised by the world. It's kind of an interesting hypothesis. Um, and then, yeah, his last section in this Journey's End, the fulfillment of all desire, basically talking about what we've been saying, that the saints who have that beatific vision, who are in heaven, that's something that we just don't have in this life. And even if you're in the unitive way, in the spiritual marriage, you're not at that beatific vision yet. And so I like this quote from John of the Cross, kind of urging people, exhorting his readers to take the spiritual life seriously. O souls created for these grandeurs and called to them, what are you doing? How are you spending your time? Your aims are base and your possessions miseries. O wretched blindness of your eyes! You are blind to so brilliant a light and deaf to such loud voices, because you fail to discern that, insofar as you seek eminence and glory, you remain miserable, base, and ignorant, and unworthy of so many blessings. So, kind of, for his readers who still weren't fully on board or fully engaged in the spiritual life, he's kind of giving them that at the end of his book, The Spiritual Canticle, giving them that little exhortation. Yeah, a little pep talk. Yeah, yeah,
But
yeah,
to that point, um, then all prayer should be for nothing more than spiritual growth. Because if you're praying for a new car or for your brother-in-law to drop dead, I mean, whatever you're, okay? I mean, some people
yeah.
pray
Those
for
are two
crazy things.
different things. Yeah,
But
but
they say if you have a more evolved spiritual conception, it answers all the questions. Do you really need that money? Do you really need that car? Do you really? That's what they say. If you have the spiritual connection, it answers every question.
sure. Yeah, and
So should we just be praying to become more spiritual instead of for money or things like that? Because that would answer the money question. If you
yeah, yeah. Should we just be praying for spiritual reasons, or is there some way where we could pray for physical things? Or I mean, I think, yeah, definitely our faith would say we can pray for our physical needs. That our needs be met. That's the give us this day our daily bread. Basically
yeah, but God's
means.
going to take care of us no matter what, whatever it is, He's taking care of us. So
Right.
we can forget that.
Right. Well, yeah. I mean, I think it's
I'm just being,
yeah.
you know,
No, I get it. Yeah. The kind of you're pointing to this real thing that, like, yeah, we shouldn't be praying for like a new
anything,
Lamborghini or something.
anything
Yeah.
other than
But
spiritual understanding.
I think that's a little
Too far.
extreme. Yeah. But I think you're
It's
getting at an
okay.
important point. Yeah. Where yeah we shouldn't be praying for people to drop dead, or like you mentioned. Yeah. But yeah, we like, yeah, that would be kind of a disordered version of, give us this day our daily bread. Whereas, yeah, what Jesus says is, yeah, you can pray for your needs, your daily bread. You're not praying for like an overabundance, give me bread for the whole year because I want to be ready, for whatever comes my way. But,
And
just,
against my point, they say as you pray for something, while you're thinking about it, sometimes the answer unveils itself. Okay?
yeah,
So, yes, I would be wrong in that sense.
Right. And
But I was thinking more along the lines of people that are struggling with things. There's a spiritual answer to stuff.
sure, yeah. And I think that it's a big difference too, depending on how you're approaching God. So I think it's a great thing to approach God as a loving Father, and asking Him for the things we need, or even the things that we desire that are good. If it maybe not something we don't need, but something we want, and it's not bad, it's not sinful. Maybe I do want to be able to take a trip with my family or something, and I don't know if it's going to work out, and so I pray for that. I think that could be a good thing, as opposed to someone who's being demanding of God. God, I need this. Give this to me, or else we're done. I'm not going to pray anymore. So yeah, I think as long as we're doing it in a humble way of asking our loving Father for the things we need or things we want, but always recognizing too, if we don't get it, it's not God's fault. It's something, God thought it would be best for me to not have that right now. Yeah, yeah, very different from being kind of demanding in our prayer. Um, yeah, and so his conclusion in this book, which I think he writes basically for people who do get discouraged in these final chapters of like, I'm never going to make it there. He affirms at the end, this journey is beyond a shadow of a doubt for everyone, and if we persevere by God's grace, we will reach the journey's end. So yeah, if the last few chapters kind of bogged you down or bummed you out, yeah, just remember that it is for everyone. We are all called to this holiness. God is seeking all of us. Especially if we're seeking Him, that means that He's already sought after us and brought us somewhat into this spiritual life. So yeah, it is possible. We're not maybe at that unitive way, or maybe some are, but yeah, we're always growing in this life, in the spiritual life. So um, yeah, final encouragement of Ralph Martin, and my final encouragement for all of us, that yeah, the spiritual life is worth it, and yeah, we'll make it there one way or another, and with God's grace, we will persevere. So, any other questions or points of yeah?
When you first talked about this book, you said that you really liked Ralph Martin, but even though he was fired because of it, and the more I read, the more I tried to figure it out, I realized it was logical that he was fired because the person who was supposedly over him as a boss would be very intimidated by the fact that he knows so much more than the person who came up.
Where was he hired?
Sacred Heart Seminary in Michigan. He was a professor and a new bishop for his, but there was a lot involved with.
So bishops are fallible.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. No, yeah, I mean, I think he was. Yeah, it seems to be more for political reasons. I mean, obviously, he's a great writer on the spiritual life, and yeah, I'm sure he's been able to, you know, it's part of like the dark night, or part of the difficulties that come up, having to deal with unjust situations like that. So yeah, I mean, yeah, he's a great writer, and he's able to make these things relatable to a lot of people. So yeah, I definitely appreciate that about him.
Just a quick question.
Sure.
That's not work related.
Okay.
Are we gonna be prohibited from kneeling? Yes.
Uh,
Communion.
no. Yeah.
Well, are you talking about the kneelers and the?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, we can continue that after the class. Yeah. But any other book related questions or anything?
I just wanted to say thank you for bringing this book to our attention.
Yes.
I think it is a remarkable piece of work, and he has very succinctly picked out what these saints have said, and a lifetime of reading wouldn't necessarily get you this conclusion. So really, it's the essence of what they're saying. So thank you for this book.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
I for one am very enthusiastic. And thank you for your time with us and spending with us.
Of
Because
course.
as you pointed out, Jesus is with us, and we are healing, and we are in front of the Master. And so thank you, Father.
Yeah. Thank you. I appreciate that. And yeah, it was a great opportunity to go through the book. And yeah, it says it's a guidebook for the journey to God. So it's kind of like we at least have the map, we have the guidebook, even if we haven't made it all the way there. It's pretty helpful, I think, to return to. So yeah, no, it is like the Boy Scout manual. Yeah. Okay, Marshall, last word.
Best thing what I feel about you is that you're never shocked
Okay.
at what we ask you or say. You just accept all humans.
Okay. Well, that's very kind. Yeah. No, I appreciate it. Yeah. So, all right. Well, thank you, everyone. Appreciate being here. Yeah.